Mm. Mm.
Aloha.
Hello.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Hope everybody's doing okay.
If you want to see everyone here, please look at the other page. People are still coming. Uh, welcome, welcome.
Okay, well, we can get started today. Glad everyone who's here could make it.
Yes. Mm.
So, once again, coming to let your eyes come to close and get settled in your seated posture. The invitation is always to try to make this transition carefully, noticing if there is a kind of shift in mental attitude that happens even just in this beginning transition, and being careful with that. Sometimes we simply close our eyes and continue on with the kind of momentum of attention and tendencies that we had a few moments ago. Other times we can get very tense and buckle down on our mind and body as we try to get serious about our meditation practice. And trusting that there might be a whole spectrum in between those two that are that is valuable to explore. Making an earnest transition into this more receptive quality of attention, but being careful not to strain the mind, heart, or body with the force of our ambition. So we notice what we notice in the mind, heart, and in the body-based sense doors, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, all the sensations of physicality itself. We notice them slipping by outside of our control. This flood of fabrication, also including the knowing, the thoughts, the mental impressions that are arising and passing each moment. And so we have to be careful with the quality of attention we try to bring, try to attend to this flood of experience. Too loose and we don't notice anything. We just wander with our minds. Too tight, too dense. We lose the ability to keep up the flow of sensation. Not trying to manipulate or control the experience of life as it's unfolding, but trying to observe it more clearly. We know there is a value to sometimes narrowing that field of attention to one area of our experience. So narrowing in on simply the experience of sound at the ear door, not excluding the body or the mind and its other capacities, but bringing to the fore the sensitivity to the changing phenomena of sound. See how quickly the mind tries to name and identify what it's hearing. We can appreciate this capacity of the heart, but not confuse those ideas with the direct experience. The receptivity of these textures, tones, vibrations at the ear door. This inclination to get closer just to the sounds coming and going. Not getting so distracted or caught up in the ideas, preferences, opinions of what we're hearing. But being careful as we get closer, try to develop the sensitivity, and we're not striving for an expectation to get something out of these sounds, insight, wisdom. can see that subtle shift from genuine interest, dedicated attention, to grasping, and seeing how that actually slows the mind down. And this subtlety, moment by moment, of the appropriate level of intensity, of interest, energy, mindfulness, concentration. Sometimes a very subtle shift can have a very big impact in our ability to stay connected to the field of changing sensation. And that within even a few moments, what is called for can change. Easing up, moving inward. The changing is not only in the objects of sound, but in the mind itself that's observing. Moment by moment, we reapply the mindfulness, connection, the interest, the care. There is no locking into it and staying frozen with the attention. The same is true, of course, if we decide it's more supportive to open the field of attention to the body. This huge range, pressure, tension, tingling, hardness, softness, coolness, warmth, moisture, dryness, cohesion, distension. Never still for a moment, always changing, always new, each moment requiring a new intention to observe, connect, receive, fathom. The changing, undependable nature of all that we encounter in the body and throughout the body. Again, sometimes more narrow, just the area around the hands, or on the abdomen, where the breath is moving on its own. Sometimes this smaller field of attention is helpful for gathering concentration, sense of possibility of attending to all of this change. Wherever we bring the attention, the breath, the hands, the body, or sound, just trusting moment by moment, we're learning how to connect, but that the attention itself is fluid, changing, dynamic, unstatic, requiring this impulse to observe, to learn, to keep up with. Moment by moment, the body arises, the mind arises, body passes away, the mind passes away. Moment by moment, we're called again to show up, and learn, and bear, and explore. Whatever is arisen, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, because it's real, true. Slowly building our faith in that honesty and the heart's ability to listen and learn, no matter what's happening in our practice. Hmm. So, Michelle and I have some time today to take any questions that you may have about your practice, about our instructions, anything that you might want to check in with about your practice, anything we might be able to support with. Um, so we have some time for that. If you have a question that you'd like to ask, the best way at the bottom of the Zoom screen, if you move your mouse around, there's a button that says React. And if you click on that, you'll see many reaction possibilities. And a raise hand is the one that will let us know you have a question. And if that's not working, you can just type into the chat that you have a question, and we'll call on you to ask it, or you can wave your arms around, and we'll usually see that as well. Well, I was about to call it a day, Karen. You saved the Sunday sitting.
Okay.
uh, can you
Okay.
unmute yourself there? Let's see.
Only a,
There we go.
a question that came up for me during the retreat, and I thought it was so, I don't know how good a question it is. Anyway, in the retreat, you were talking about being kind to ourselves and being tender, and and I was raised with almost no kindness and no tenderness, and uh, which has left me something I've been working on forever. um, but I was just wondering, given that that's my what my therapist would call my neural pathways to a certain extent, um, and that we were working on my gender stuff actually, and she said you have no neural pathways to like being a girl because it was so abhorrent to both my parents. So I've been working on that, and when you said the kindness and tenderness, that sort of went in with that to how do you I understand my meditation practice is pretty crappy really, but I'm trying, and sometimes but how do you the I'm just how do I go from the chasm of untenderness and unkindness to I'm getting better at being kind to myself. But it's so that's my question, is if that's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like can you say a little more about where you do feel like there is when the recognition that you're quote unquote getting better or that there are places where kindness fits in. I mean, you've expressed things here that have been, very kind in this context. So, do you have can you say any more about where it does feel like you have had access or mm, some connection to
Well,
that?
I am gifted with good guidance. And the way I get guidance for myself is to write out all my bullshit. And then when I get tired of that, I ask guidance and I get good guidance. And sometimes my guidance actually said to me, it's of the old, that it's just from the past, and I get kindness in my guidance. And so that's probably the best. I don't write out my guidance enough. I've been in a really tough period of health, moving, construction on a rental. It's been a rough go here. Uh, and so I've been pretty stressed, and it's when the very times when I should use my guidance, I often don't. And so, but when I do, it's amazingly kind. And sometimes I can just, I have a lot of trouble accepting that I'm 80 and having all the things that go with being 80, or some of the things, not all, but thank God. Um, and sometimes I can be kind about that. That's a reach, I'll say. Does that help you?
Yeah, and maybe just I'm sorry to keep I'm not meaning to like interrogate, but just kind of curious, like to help us, the sense of like your guidance. Do you mean that in terms of like a kind of inner guidance or a universal guidance or like an actual person?
It's not a person.
Mhm.
Um, what I call it is there's the bullshit I write, which is from a lot of past and negative stuff. And then what I call is the truth. That's what I call my guidance. It just comes to me in relation to the stuff I've written, and taking what I've written as with kindness. I mean, it doesn't say it's bullshit. It's, it just says what the truth is about my thoughts. And I guess the reason I'm asking this question is because, again, without writing I should write my guidance every day, but I don't. And so to have Michele say, treat yourself with kindness and tenderness, I get it up here, but doing it as my first response is somewhat tenuous at best.
Um, they, Jesse, are you ready for me to pop in yet? Or I think it's a very um, huge question. So that's why Jesse's asking, because it's when you deconstruct like the moment to moment experience of like there's thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, right? There's smells, sounds. It's like from a sixth sense or moment to moment awareness. The kind the question of what is kindness is very interesting, because the question would be what what can you be kind for? But that would include, in the loving kindness practice, for example, the way it was taught in the commentaries, you would start not with yourself necessarily if yourself is difficult to be kind toward. So you would pick the easiest being you could find and start being kind to that being. Say it was a cat or a dog or a bird or a human, but you would practice being kind for that being until you felt the kindness for them or that being, and then you would see if you could then feel that for yourself. So do you see there's a variety of ways to go with tenderness, kindness. It can be just simply a gesture of touching oneself kindly in the heart, or you see there's lots of ways to go. And I think what we both of us are hearing you describe is that the thought process is so conditioned to be, the neural pathway tends to be a conditioned thought process of not being kind. Is that right? Like the thoughts you have for yourself are not kind.
Yeah,
Right. And
basically. I mean, I
that,
am better, but that's when the rubber meets the road that I'm not kind to myself.
right. And so that being able to do what's you have to, when this is a pattern, you've hit the get jackpot with me because that's my conditioning. And I know how hard it is to work on this. But so much of it is finding where it can be a pathway, a different pathway
Mm.
into yourself. So you try to avoid the neural pathway that is so, it's like a groove that's so predominant, and
Mm.
it's almost like you can hear it, but you do other things to balance it so that that's not all the airtime. That's like a radio on in the background that's so loud you don't hear any other stations, and you can't get any other stations, and you have to work hard at this, like, but you can't expect like zero. If you're at zero, which you're not presenting yourself at zero. If you pick 0 to 100, where are you?
Well, there's some things like my civil rights work that I did, and do. That is something I feel very good about. And I can be, when I'm talking to a class or something, I can, I go into the zone and I'm not unkind to myself or to anybody else. And so there are areas. I love my cat, except it bit me the other day. But uh, you know, um, and I love my partner, and
See,
you know,
you've got a lot going for you there, really. Like there are some people don't have any. They're at zero. So we move along, and it's like you describe that the work that you feel goodness with, and you can remember, you could start if you're wanting to find an entryway into your heart, then that's one place to start.
mhm,
Yeah, and remember that goodness. But the big part of that is receiving it, not just through the thought process.
yeah,
So you try to spend as much time with feeling that goodness. And for example, with the cat, if you started a meditation and you wanted to start it with loving kindness, you would spend time receiving the goodness, maybe doing metta with the cat, and then bringing it back to yourself. Do you see? Like you keep reinforcing these different pathways.
mhm,
It's like a pathway into your own heart.
yeah.
Rather,
No,
the neural
I like
pathway,
that. Yeah.
yeah, the neural pathway you're describing is a neural pathway out of your heart. And that highway is a bit, you know how to take that turn onto that highway a lot. And so, I recommend if you're on the highway, just take the civil rights work exit, or take the cat exit, or take the partner exit.
Hmm.
Right. You just start learning how to walk a different pathway. And it doesn't matter how long. It's like you do it to the point where you can't do it anymore, and don't try to push that. It's almost like You enjoy it because basically you're describing yourself as somebody who can care
Oh
and
yeah.
who yeah, and
I, I,
can be
I
kind.
was at the coast a week ago and a hummingbird flew like right near me. I haven't seen a hummingbird in like 2 years. I used to camp and watch birds. That's what I, not naming them, but just watching them. And this hummingbird came and flew right near me, and I watched it. And I mean, it moved me so much. I went from, it gave me so much hope just to see that hummingbird. So I have it. It's just I don't I'm not, I don't use it enough, or I don't uh, practice it enough, or something, so that, and with the stresses that I have, it's been difficult. I guess that's life. I mean, it's one of the things I like about what you teach is that you can't control what's happening. You have to come to some kind of acceptance, whether you like it or not.
Exactly. I mean, that's part of the wisdom side of the practice. There's the loving kindness side and the wisdom side. And the wisdom side is supposed to help with being able to do the loving kindness no matter what, right? No matter what the conditions are. And that's easier said than done.
Yes.
But I think that when you describe a very stressful day-to-day time, boy, I would do whatever you can to get out of these situations enough for the time out for you. Like that's how you break the pattern. If you're in your house and it's getting too much, get out.
Mhm.
Yeah, go in the car. If you have a car, right? Like you do what
I-
you
Yeah.
get outside for a walk a lot. Like even if it's like a 10-minute walk, but I recommend doing what you need to do. Do you have a room in the house you can escape to right now?
Uh, Kind of. We just built an art room, but it's also being used for storage. But like this morning, I actually did my Bowflex exercises for the first time in a long time, and that really feeds me and makes me feel good. And so I said we could put shit all around everywhere except for where the Bowflex is. And, excuse my language. I guess I'm not supposed to be swearing, but anyway. Um, uh, anyway, yeah, so, sort of, yes, yeah, is the answer.
Yeah. I think it's just a matter of prioritizing this. I mean that's like the pattern is not to prioritize this. And that's
Yeah,
by at 80, I would look in the mirror and say, isn't it about time I prioritized this, right? Like I know the feeling, so it's not like it's like okay, let's see, I can only joke about it because it takes one to know one, and I know what it's like, and I'm suggesting all the things that I see that I need to do to balance that thought stream. It's a learned, it's a learned thought stream
mhm,
that you can start getting a lot different um, pathways besides that one. I mean, even if you have to write down loving kindness phrases that work for you, that's why one of the teachings is to repeat certain phrases because it actually you repeat one phrase, may I be happy and peaceful, that is a different neural pathway.
yeah, and maybe they're less suffering for all sentient beings. That one always gets me.
Really important, really important. And sometimes we say them and they don't have much meaning, and other times they do. But certainly, even if you had a few of those sentences that you say to yourself before you go to sleep, that actually has a huge effect. Like that if you do it right before you go to sleep and maybe when you wake up and it takes 15 seconds or less.
Okay.
That could, you know what I mean? These are like, often these are things that are really short, but they change the pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Jesse, I mean, this is such a big thing, you know. Nobody else can relate to this, Karen, just you.
No, I know you do.
I know, well, yeah, I do. Yep, yep. Hmm.
That's why I keep coming back. Thank you.
I, I just maybe would also take a look at the it's like obviously like being hard on yourself is part of the the groove. Um, but like there's this kind of particular thing about giving yourself a hard time for like that you do this writing, um, kind of that you have to sort of get out a lot of other stuff before you get to what feels like the guidance. Um, but I guess I just don't really feel, and like you think that you should just get to the guidance without having to go through all that. And I guess I just don't feel like that's. I mean, it's not that I don't understand wanting that. Of course, we'd rather just be the people we wish we were, of course. And we are actually the people we encounter. And you have found a way, like that. I just to point out, like you have found a really powerful tool and method to attend to the kind of muck of the mind and get it out and put it down into words and express yourself with it, and that somehow through that process you find your way to something that feels uh,
Kind.
kind. Yeah, that's right. Let's use a simple word, right? Like that's outside of that, right? That somehow super kind of overcomes the and that you come out the other end of it. And I just feel like I wouldn't. That's it's very lucky. It's very fortunate. It's very skillful of you that you have this approach. And I wouldn't. You just have to be careful about putting the kindness in too much opposition to the other stuff,
Mm.
right? That's how you're
Sometimes I can
getting to
just
the
ask
kindness.
in
Yeah,
my
you're
mind.
getting there by going through what you're going through. So it's not like that's not the bad stuff and the kindness is the good stuff. It's like this is all kind of there's something powerful about the process that you already intuitively and practically understand. Maybe you don't fully actually intellectually understand it, but that's like the least important part, right? There's something that you get about this method, and yes, be great if you could do it more. I mean, like all of us, whatever method. But I don't want to. It just
That's
is
a
how
good
things are.
suggestion.
It's like you have to go through that. Maybe you just have to go through that in order to get to the kindness. And is that the worst thing in the world? Because that's it's like the neural pathways is like one notion, right? That's helpful and is interesting. And I don't know. I mean, it's not maybe the only metaphor either. I think sometimes there's ways of like even the judgment, even the anger, the indignation. I mean, when you look at your work with the civil rights movement, it's not like those weren't there, probably, right? You probably were angry. You probably did have indignation. There was a kind of righteous quality to connecting that you're upset because you cared about something,
Mhm.
right? That's actually not a problem of the pathway. It's not seeing the whole pathway. So it's not even that you need to change it always or get out of it or develop new pathways. It's not that I don't think that appropriate metaphor is useful. But there's
No,
also a sense it's like maybe you're angry because you care about something.
the civil rights movement actually showed me a different way to live, and uh, and I've been aspiring to it both internally and externally. but thank God for it, because it was such a different everything.
Mm.
My neural pathways were useless. I mean, they weren't even on the table, and so that's what I've always. It's not the only. I mean, I was open enough to take them,
Yeah.
to take it, and also, like I said, I still talk in classes and stuff, and but there was it. I wish for many people that they had that kind of experience, because it sounds like maybe you did in Burma. I don't know, but uh, just seeing a whole um, way of stepping forward, that for and people who were never accredited that could do anything, excuse me, but did, and
Mm-hmm.
in the most beautiful of ways. And so it was completely opposite from my family,
Mm-hmm.
and except for the external issues, but it was pretty opposite from my family, that I'm standing up to the external white supremacy. So um, it was I kind of got in it by accident, and now I say that's where I was supposed to be. I guess it's basically saved my life. So
Yeah.
um,
That's very powerful.
yeah.
So I mean, I just think that there's something in that that is that it's of course, like Michelle, you can use that as like a technique and as a, going back to that period of your life and memories and people you cared about, like that material is still valuable, right? In terms of finding a connection to care, and it's also a it's like a it's an example of something that you were able to do at one point that is not distinct from maybe what you are trying to call up in the moment, which is like, what is your relationship to the muck, whether it's the external muck or the internal muck. It's like, you don't have to like it, you don't even, but there, and it can still be muck, but that you find a way to attend to it that is still connected to your deepest values, right? Your sense of human dignity, your sense of kindness, your sense of possibility, and not just the more volatile pieces, which are still reasonable, right? I mean, that's a part of what my sense of like what you've learned is like. Yes, the righteous indignation is important, but that's not disconnected from the care, and it doesn't actually mean that you behave in ways that are creating more muck and more violence and whatever, right? More oppressiveness. And so it's like this sense that you have that in your past, you have a tool right now, and that to be careful, it's mostly just like, be careful about thinking the muck is just muck versus like this stuff. There's gold in there, and it has to do with that you care about it. You care about yourself, actually. You don't want to feel this way. You don't want to feel these feelings, right? And that is actually rooted in caring. It comes out more contorted than that, and it comes out in judgment and vitriol and things. But the root of it is actually caring, and that sometimes you don't need to change the neural pathway. The pathway will lead you to that. It's just you don't see the source of it as caring. So it's just to sort of take the possibility of another approach to the same kind of questions. And then, of course, if you're having a hard time physically or having loud stuff around you, it's very difficult to find the conditions that are supportive. So, of course, everything Michelle said of like where you can affect the conditions of the sound, the space, like you went camping or into the shore, and it's like, yeah, nature and beauty and hummingbirds. It's like, yeah, you do need to, in the exercise, right? It's like this sense of, we have to take some responsibility for conjuring supportive conditions as much as possible, because you just get worn down otherwise, and that's just very human. It's not you're bad because of that, it's just very hard. So I think but be careful with the notion that you're not making enough progress, or you're not doing enough, or whatever. It's very hard to manage these things, and really you're doing, it sounds clearly to us like a very amazing job at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add one more thing, is that we do we do teach that believing the thought that you learn in your family make you feel unlovable, that standing up to those thoughts are also getting free of oppression, right? Like there's a sense of caring about your own freedom and your own liberation and the oppression of thought. Those thoughts are oppressing you in the present moment, and that any way that you can get to see that if you believe them, you are going to feel unlovable and unworthy, right? And so that's why you replace them with loving kindness phrases, or you're doing everything else to work with it. But I'm just wanting to say that you can also at times directly really just say, I don't believe you. I don't believe you anymore.
That's one of the things about being 80 is faced with mortality at some point,
Yeah,
and I really don't want to die this way.
right.
And
And
so
so, but
it has,
it's only a thought. Basically, you're getting caught in one little teeny thought that's still repeating. And I'm saying at times you're going to have the courage and the strength to just say, I don't believe it.
okay,
I don't believe it. I just do not believe it anymore.
thank you.
And certainly your partner can reassure you that that's correct,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
thank you.
that's also part of the strength is like mostly we're going to say to everybody, don't believe most of your thoughts. Don't believe most of them. Never mind those. But just bringing that care to that's where we get so imprisoned, and you have the capacity to care about your freedom like you've cared about a lot of other people's freedom.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah. Great.
Um, Marina had a question just before Arlene. Do you want to um, add anything to this, Marina? I can read it out loud too, but if you could say more, or if I
Not
see.
not really. Yeah, I think that kind of says it. I'm out of practice with sitting for meditation. So the 45 minutes on Sundays now that I'm trying to get into is even more. I noticed I was like, don't look at the clock, and then at 7:44 I looked at the clock. It's like, oh, one more minute.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty good.
anyway, I had periods of 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 um of no pain and bliss, and I was watching the movement of the pain, but I just think I could use up some tips and pointers and reminders about any how to work through that. I mean, I know that it can become an object of the of the meditation, somehow. So
Yeah,
to hear.
no, it's a really important question. So if folks haven't read it, she's speaking of tender and kind. I have a question about working with the body pain during practice. I have severe is that scoliosis or yeah, and sitting is about the worst thing for me. Is it okay to move, adjust, stretch, which is pretty essential over 45 minutes? So yeah, no, it's such an important question, and of course, you'll see different answers and responses and kind of frameworks in different traditions and lineages and methods and stuff. So we feel, yeah, very strongly that it's more important to find an experience that you can be with genuine mindfulness rather than force yourself to sit through something excruciating that actually ends up just causing more turmoil. I think that's the sort of cleanest way to say it. That, yes, as you say, it's like there can certainly be a value in sitting through unpleasant experience in the body and the mind, and that we can learn a lot through it. It can be very concentrating in its way, if you can get interested in it. But with extreme pain or extreme pleasure, it's often very hard to actually be mindful of it in a stable way, right? That you might try to be interested for a moment and you're sort of there, and sometimes you really can get kind of engrossed, but often you'll start to see you're trying to kind of maybe use the attention to move the energy or open it up or change it, or you just get kind of frozen in a really harsh pattern, with it. And in that kind of, extreme situation and that kind of chronic situation, we definitely feel, yeah, very strongly, confidently that it's just more helpful to move and find a more stable physical posture that invites more genuine interest in the mind. That we're not always trying to work at like the most horrendous edges of our physical and mental emotional experience. There are times where that the mind can do that, but it's better to spend most of our time in more neutral experience and the range in order to build the capacity for the harder stuff. So as you kind of say, moving, adjusting. I mean, I think that in particular, the sense of using different postures, so coming to standing, and doing standing meditation for a while, doing lying meditation for a while, those would be our those would probably be our kind of like initial encouragements. I mean, sort of course, there's like minor sitting adjustments, but coming to standing or going to lying, um, as trying to just find basically a different baseline posture. The question of getting very involved in like stretching during a sitting, I think, is probably more nuanced and sort of depends. I think that there's nothing wrong with stretching, right? And that you can be a very, very important part of people's spiritual practice and physical well-being. I think that the hard part about that is just to recognize it as different. The inclination is going to tend to be different than just mindfulness. You're going to be trying to get something out of the volitional activity of the mind and body, right? You're trying to move things in a way to ease things up. You're trying to, and so it's like a little bit of that just to create a little bit of space, and then to settle again is fine. But if you end up, the idea of spending a long period of the sitting doing stretching, ends up kind of really just being a different practice. And it's fine to do that practice, but to kind of think of it as different, because it's very hard to simply observe while you're also trying to manipulate, right? And change based on the kind of pleasant, unpleasant little entanglement. And we could say more about that, but that's, I would say, the basic encouragement and sort of space is to like, change postures in a more sort of steady way. Come to standing for a while, come to lying. Or there is, and you could do it in the sitting practice, as we do walking meditation also in this tradition. But to see how that's different than like yoga, right? That walking meditation is just like one foot in front of the other. You're noticing the sensations. You're not doing something special to kind of alter the dynamic of mind and body and kind of like make things feel more the way we want them to feel. Again, it's not that there isn't a place for that, but just to get how that's a little bit, it's different than a real sort of pure Vipassana practice. Does that sort of make sense as a basic, yeah, kind of framework? And yeah, okay. Michelle, anything you want to add?
Another one of these big questions, because it's really often the same encouragement, whether it's mental pain, emotional pain, or physical pain. And so when you look at the kind of direction of non-conceptual awareness, and the word pain. The word pain in and of itself has a lot of often ways in which we're not interested in really what's happening, because the word pain just kind of becomes an overlay. So that when you have um, enough courageous energy and you're still, um, we recommend bringing your attention really close to those sensations. So say that the pain is in your hand here, you'd bring your awareness close or inside it and just notice what the sensations are, right? But if there's disliking that comes up, then that's not the pain. Or if trying to get rid of it or fix it comes up, that is not the pain. And then one would leave it. One would leave it immediately. This is critical because a lot of work with pain, whether it's anger or sadness or grief or physical pain or a mental pattern, mostly people will hear that the instruction is to go in and stay with it too long. And the idea is that that's going to wither the unattended aversion to it is going to reinforce aversion to the pain. And so that when the attention can't actually genuinely be interested in the changing sensations, which are often um, tightness, like air element, the tightness, or the fire element, it might be heat, or the air element pressure, or it's like these throbbing air element. There are elements. There's just earth, air, fire, and water, not me or I or mine, and they're changing. But the attention does not have enough wisdom in it to be interested in it. So you might just go in there for a few seconds and be interested, and even before any aversion to it comes up, we teach people to move away to something neutral. So that, again, whether it's physical, emotional, or mental, that there's a learning, it's like a bamboo attention where you have to stay with it while there's mindfulness. And then if one cannot follow that without the aversion taking over, and you can't even be with the aversion, you shift back to something neutral. Is that's going to probably be enough for today, but it's critical. It's critical because the attention withers if you stay in there with the aversion there, and it'll rest. It'll rest with the neutral. You're trying to get enough rest, but not go off in some mental fantasy or thought process about it. You just learn how to have this bamboo attention that can go in and come out and come in and come out. And if the attention is called there 1,000 times, of course, with any of these patterns, mental, physical, or emotional, you'll get called there. You just see, oh, there's not enough mindfulness. You say hi, you move away. You notice the sensations, but you just move away. That is the most critical part of working with any kind of pain, is knowing when to move away and having an attention that's strong enough that can keep doing that rather than get into the quicksand. It becomes like quicksand.
Yeah, so you move away, like I was moving away into the breath or
Great. Yeah.
sound.
Yeah, that's great.
Um, because it is really counterintuitive to like focus on pain, right? It's like, gosh, I don't really want to do that because it could get bigger.
Well,
Or,
it will actually, that's right. It actually, that's the teaching, is that if you bring your attention there, you're going to see it more clearly. It usually does get more intense, and that's nothing wrong with that. That's not bad or wrong, but it's not like if the attention isn't strong enough, it won't work to be with it. Do you see? It's all pragmatic. It's all like learning. You're not going to learn how to be with it if it's getting more intense and it's freaking you out, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So that's, yeah.
Love that going in and out. And I
Yeah.
remember their teachings, and that makes a lot of sense here. So I'll play with that. Thank you.
A lot of playing. We've got a lot of playing we do, yes.
And I guess now I feel
Yeah.
that it's just to be the next layer of like the implication of what Michele just said is it's also just important to keep in the background, which is, it's skillfulness. What can we really be with here now? But this idea of when you bring when the capacity is there to bring the attention to more closely and over a longer period of time, something unpleasant, physical sensation, it can get more intense. But also, the more you see it, the more it's more particulate. That actually you start to see that you can be with one moment of this, one moment of that. The moments themselves are arising and passing. It's not as stable and solid of a thing as we tend to feel like it is, and that there is a way through it directly that is possible. And just the last thing is that often when you realize that it's actually the mind that's harder to be with. It's the freaked outness, it's the agony, the despair, the hopelessness. The physical pain itself ends up not being, at times you see that it's much easier to be with than what's happening, the reciprocal response in the mind, heart, that we're not even seeing until a certain point. And that you start to realize, like, well, it's actually, that's really the hard part, where the pain itself is, throbbing, pulsing, stinging, stabbing, moving particles, and so is the mind. But anyway,
Yeah, I call it
that's the
I'm never gonna
right.
find, I'm never gonna
Exactly.
fit
And you're like,
in
oh,
this.
that's solid feeling, right? Yeah. And so at some point you go be like, okay, that's not solid. Just like the last question. It's like, but boy, when you getting that, it's time to back off because it's just like we're so identified with that view and the kind of emotional entanglement around it. So yeah, you're careful with it. Great. Mm. Arlene, did you have a question? Still? Yeah. Oh, hold on, you're muted again. Oh, there you go. There you go.
Hi,
Yep.
Arlene.
Whoops.
No, you're good. You're good. You're good.
We weren't able to
Oh,
see
you disappeared yourself.
I'm not seeing you.
That's great.
Um, I kind of recognized when you were talking about loving kindness earlier, that when I'm feeling that, and in my meditation, that, and in my practice generally in the day, because I meditate, maybe once or twice a day and do some walking because I have a lot of free time. What I recognized is that I feel when I'm in the practice and it's going the way it's going. It's not only, feeling the sadness, it's not only the loving kindness. But when I feel this wholeness, I kind of push myself to do more. It's not, and I think in a lot of ways, it's not only in my sitting practice, but it's in my life that there's something about the kindness or this feeling that the judgment or whatever, and well, then you should be doing more. If you and Michele have something to say about that.
Well, is it a kind of doubt?
No, in terms of my practice,
No, in terms of
it's the doubt about me.
yeah, that
Definitely,
like that's what I
you
meant.
know,
Yeah,
I'm not doing it right. Or,
right.
um,
I mean, I
I
think, Carlene, it's like it's such a very clear description of what happens. Like, and not just for you, of like, we talk about like I mean, all of it, of course, but the Brahma Viharas in particular as like very purifying. And I think that part of what you're describing is the challenge of the purification process with these things, right? That you do finally feel like you get to something. You know what I mean? Like you feel something wholesome, beautiful, stable, good. And and then it's like this sense of dissatisfaction, not good enough, or it's not lasting long enough, or you see how hard it is to get there. And then once you do, all of the forces that are at play that are so destabilizing of that. And I think that's just, it feels personal because it's, of course, there's a way in which it's your patterns and it's familiar and you recognize it. But there is a way that we do have to get past that sense of it as personal, and versus that sort of, it's part of the helpfulness of, it has the other side of it, but like it's Mara, or what I mean, this idea of like it's just doubt, or it's the forces of delusion, or it's this sense of how hard it is for the mind to just stabilize around something good, or that it's so loose and free and equanimous that the good beautiful thing happens and then it dissipates and it's no big deal. It's like, yeah, things come and go based on conditions. So you'll say there's two ideal situations. One that you're like, oh, you just kind of hang out in this loving kindness and you get more sort of absorbed in it, or it comes and goes as things do and you're not entangled. But instead, what we find is some version of exactly what you're describing, which is like,
I
oh,
think
yeah.
I I think that for me, there's the should in it, where um, that having the freedom and having um, the opportunity, it's not only around this meditation, it's it's much more. I just kind of recognize that the propel the the this strangeness of feeling good,
Hmm.
and the and if you are feeling good, then you should be blah, 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 blah. It's
Right. No, I
always,
mean, I
yeah.
think it's very insightful that like what you're seeing is not just all this, you're seeing what you would think of as like a very deep karmic knot, right? Or a very deep psychological tendency. And one way to talk about that is you're having an experience that is unfamiliar and beautiful, and it is outside of that normal sense of who we are and the sort of self that we've constructed. And we spend all this time trying to let go of the self, the constructed self, and feeling like we want to get beyond it. But then you do. And what you're describing is like it's classical, right? Which is to say, you have a moment of relief, of like the guard goes down, things don't that voice doesn't need to be there. It's very pure, and it's so unfamiliar. The mind, at some point, the mind stops trusting that as a stable, secure thing. And what is stable and secure? The version of Arlene that you're very familiar with, right? The me, the doubt, I'm not doing enough, right? However you would describe the version any of us that we're more familiar with. It's like the familiarity of that word, or the should, or the thought pattern, or the sound of our own voice in it, is a sign of how kind of core the pattern is, you know. And then it's like, oh, can we rejoice in that? Can we be like, oh, look, the mind is trying to protect itself from this unfamiliar, beautiful thing that's like it doesn't feel safe in, and how crazy that can feel, but also like it is real. It is exactly what we're working with, and so that you're seeing both of those things in juxtaposition, I think is wonderful. And that at some point, it's like the work is not crushing that or getting rid of that or digging so deep into the love and kindness that you kind of blow it out. I mean, of course, there are methods that are more like along those lines, but the more path of wisdom is at some point it's like, oh, you don't care. Of course, the mind is doing this. Oh, the mind wants the safety of familiar me, and it's no big deal. And you watch you watch the self just like reconfigure into this like solid, stable, familiar thing. And it's like, okay, that's what the mind is needing. And then at some point it loosens again, unfamiliar, comes back. And that's the practice actually, is not thinking we're getting rid of that more and more, but you're watching the kind of disintegration and reintegration of the self based on conditions. And that's really a deeper practice and more realistic and more rich in terms of how this actually works versus like, oh, we're just going to keep getting to kind of like higher states of consciousness and dropping things away. It's like, meh. It's like, no, we're watching this accordion of meanness, you know. And yeah, it's great.
I
Michelle?
would just, yeah, I would just amplify that, this is called the path of purification. But when you look at what that means, it's like a path of purifying motivation. And so this is exciting, Arlene. It's exciting because you're getting quiet enough and it's quiet and it's going along. And that idea that Jesse already said it, but I'm putting it from that like a different languaging that of course, like the little me is going to assert itself there. That's the purification. That's actually so that when we react to that, that's what we're supposed to be seeing. We only want to see the good stuff, but then when we actually get to see the aversion to the loss of that equanimity, that's the practice. But we think we should try to get back right to that versus except that we take care of that.
I think I want to, my motivation, it's not a thought practice. I want to give myself another problem. It's not that.
Yeah, no, but I think that's what Jesse is describing as the karmic knot, and that I mean, we know you well enough to know that you're supposed to be suffering, Arlene. You're not supposed to be like, okay, like that's like,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah. So like that's the little me saying, no, 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 I want to suffer,
Okay.
yeah.
No, thank you both.
Mm,
No, that's
Really.
what we're saying. It's exciting because it's getting more clear. It's exciting. Yeah, very wonderful.
that's great. Amanda had a question. She can't find her. She's on her phone, so she couldn't find her raise hand button. And then Jackie, and we may be a little shorter with them, but let's go for it. Hey, Amanda.
Hi, thank you. Um, the responses that you had to Arlene's question actually feel quite relevant, but I will still ask my question. Um, I I feel like ultimately the thing I'm struggling with most right now is I have such a hard time slowing down. I get so excited about so many different things and get involved in all these different projects and then get a lot of feedback from other people. They're like, wow, you can like do so much stuff. And so then I keep doing more stuff. And I had maybe like 3 weeks ago, felt like I kind of hit this um, bottom of just feeling like I am like empty, like I am so wiped out. I I don't have more to give to all these different projects, and like I really have to change. Like I was really in contact with the suffering in that, and the suffering that that like pace um, creates. And so then I like really doubled down on resting and taking care of myself and going to acupuncture and all the things. And then like 5 days later, I was like, my tank's full again. And then I'm back at it. And that is so frustrating. Like I was hearing in your responses to Arlene about this, like, oh, that's the familiar self. That's the familiar like habit pattern of like running at this pace. And some part of me feels like there's like self-criticism, like why do I keep doing this? Like I can see that it's harmful, or trying to like remember back, like okay, right, this is painful, and I actually was really able to tap into that. Like maybe reflecting on that more would be useful, but um I'm like back at my crazy pace that's not sustainable, and I'm still doing it.
Well, no, this one, but it's almost like if you see it as setting boundaries with yourself,
Yeah.
right? Like, it's that equanimity again. Um, how does it feel when you say no, no to that part of you that wants to keep doing so much?
Mm-hmm.
Like to get in touch with that.
Mm-hmm.
None of us like to really hear no, the boundary.
Yeah.
And I think this again, knowing you and knowing what you were working with at the last retreat, and like it's
Still
an
doing it.
yeah, but it's an internal one. It's
Yeah.
actually an internal boundary, not an external one. And
Yes.
sometimes that's not as visible to us. That it's not to demonize the part that's so good at what you're doing, and all the positive feedback, the all the strokes you get for it. That's all a kind of goodness. And there's another part that's really hurting.
Yeah.
And that it's like, that's the part that to say no to what you're being good at, familiar, it's like, yeah, this is the last question. But going into that unknown territory of giving this other part more airtime
Mm-hmm.
out of great compassion.
Mm-hmm. It's like like forget the problem that it's creating. Um, of like, no, but I can do these things, and I really care about them. And um, yeah, it for sure is the internal boundary. Because the other thing I was seeing about recently is like, well, maybe I should just like quit these things I'm doing. And it's like, I've been moving at this pace since long before these jobs and commitments. And if I don't do something different, I will just find the next thing to fill that in. Like it's not the external
Right. Yeah, it's
piece.
an internal boundary.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe not have to go from, again, like the pace of it. Sometimes we tend to, it's easier for us, on retreat where it's easier not to eat as much, then you go back home and it's harder. Like all these
Yeah.
things. It's like the middle path is so hard. And you can see it in the extremes in the
Mm,
world these days. The middle path is actually harder. So you might look at it as not like taking everything away, right? But
yeah.
it's like getting a middle path here. That's often harder.
Yeah. That's a good reminder. Thank you.
Mm.
I do want to. I think there is something. Part of the mystery and uncertainty and unknownness is, there are just times in our lives where we're called to do more because of obligation or because of inspiration. And you don't want to totally pathologize that right? Either, right? Where sometimes it's just how life is. There's things that you have to show up for. You've taken responsibilities, and that's the karma, right? That's like you this is what happens, and you want to show up for things that you've committed to. And so, and that there's like the practice is not just meditation, right? There is all this way in which the practice is also the sharing of our goodness and dana and all of its expressions, and our ethical conduct, and it's not, the Eightfold Path is not just the sort of concentration and mindfulness part. So it's like, to be careful, you don't want to, it's like, okay, there's like the doing of that which is good, and there is sometimes there are cycles in our lives where sometimes we are more involved, more invested, more at our edge. I think that's sort of normal for being a layperson that has responsibilities and takes them up, on some level. The question of where is it a deeper pattern that we are never finding our way out of, where we don't, the cyclical nature of it doesn't kind of come to, there's no quiet side then, right? I mean, it's like, yes, you're still finding time to go on retreat every year, and can you do longer retreats or more punctuated time? So sometimes it's like, it's sort of that. It's like, okay, the momentum of our lives is one thing. What are the respite periods, whether it's the ease, health, vacation, acupuncture, whether it's formal intensive retreats, that's part of it. Reckoning with like who we are, where does it nourish us and where does it deplete us? I mean, it's an ongoing thing, just it's like you already said, this is like a deep piece of yourself. It's not like you're just going to stop or undo this patterning, right? Like, because you decided that you're tired or something, But it's good to be sensitive to the place where you're like, oh, I'm just like running myself into the ground. Like if that's really what it feels like, yes, there's information there that's important of like, what is that? What is the compulsion? What is going on there? And where I think kind of like what Michelle's also pointing to, it's like the boundary isn't, if we can't always trust our own decisions in the moment around the boundary. Say you talk about like addiction or something, right? Then it's like structure. What is the structure that we create for ourselves that isn't just dependent on us always making the wisest choice in the moment, right? What are the bigger moments of, like you're saying, like when you let some things go, or you pace things in a different way, or you plan out what the next few months are, whatever that structure might look like, where it's not always dependent on you making the wisest decision at the place of greatest exhaustion, right? It's like that's a setup. And so I think that the fact that you're sensitive to it is great. The fact that you already have some structure built in is really important. And it's definitely a part of the conundrum of being a layperson,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Helpful. Thank you both.
Good luck with it. Jackie.
Hey, Jackie.
Hey, hello. I think you probably answered most of this already with Arlene and the other questions, which is really interesting because I always find this. I think about asking a question and then it somehow gets evolved in the whole conversation. But mine was about doubt too, because when Jesse was giving the instructions, he said something about looking inwards because that's the truth. And this little voice goes, is it? Is that the truth? And it was definitely my voice. It wasn't, because sometimes I'll hear a voice and it's not, it could be something, but it was definitely, so that's what it makes sense where all that stuff you were saying, this is the person that you've taught yourself to be or whatever, rather than, but it struck me because I really normally do trust. Ever since I've made contact with my internal world, my spiritual world, I've really trusted it. And I've never really questioned that before. And then suddenly, randomly today, this, up it pops, like, this doubt thing, I guess. I mean, and I have had that kind of Mara thing happen to me before as well. You know, I remember coming into the house once and opening the door and thinking, but what if it's not true? And I went, oh, hi, Mara. You know, like like in the moment recognized it then. And then this time it was more like, oh, why am I thinking that? And so I just wanted to kind of just ask about practices with doubt, because it's not, because I don't normally have it, it's kind of shocking when it comes, you know. I'm like, oh, you know, what's that
Yeah.
doing? So that's kind of, and you did talk a lot about it, and I really appreciated what you said about what have I written down here? The mind finds it hard to stabilize about around the something good, which is what you said in response to Arlene's.
Yeah, yeah. But also, I mean, there is healthy doubt. I mean, I think I feel like that's a good sign that like I might have said something and you were like, is that true? You know, what I mean, that's like the classic Buddha's, like he's like, don't just believe me, check it out for yourself. That, the distinguishing thing around like kind of healthy doubt and kind of cynical doubt is this question of does it engage you in investigation? Right. So I think there's nothing wrong. Well, there's nothing wrong with any thought, but this idea of like having a thought that that it's like, don't be careful to just always necessarily think that there's a shadow to faith too, right? Where you're not actually investigating for yourself what's happening. And so I think that it sounds almost like just the flavor that you say it in, it's like, yeah, if it's the doubt that we're so kind of careful around and see as so much potential problem is the doubt that's like, I don't believe this, I'm not like the thing that stops you from investigating, right? This thing that gets you off the path because you're just like, whatever, I can't do this, or this isn't it, or the versus like a doubt that is uncertain but interested, which sounds more like what you were describing. That's considered like a healthy skepticism. That's a mind that wants to know for itself. And so it's like, is that really true? Let me check. It's like if there's a genuine interest in that checking, then you can feel good about that quality of doubt and not just sort of blind faith in something. Well, that's my initial thought, Michelle.
I think that's how you gauge it, is that the teaching is that doubt as a hindrance, the hindrance of doubt will tend to prevent us from practicing. And so you're getting less and less medicine. And that's how it's put. Like you're getting less and less medicine because it's crippling you in terms of that healthy investigation. So that's how you know if it's the doubt. I mean, we all have a doubt that is like a karmic knot. It's a kind of thought pattern that we bite for. For me, it was always, I'm not working hard enough. I'm not working hard enough, but it would be really, I wasn't happy with how my practice was going, but I would believe that thought and then just proceed to have a lot of trying to make my practice better by believing that thought. Do you see how I would get more and more disconnected from the present moment because I just believed that thought, and it took a long time for me to recognize it because that was the work ethic I was brought up with. If you just work harder, it's going to make everything okay, right? And so that's like, do you see what I'm trying to say? That there's thought patterns that we have to be really careful of because they tend to be so slippery. That's why they're karmic knots because they're so believable. But as Jesse says, the way you describe what happened, it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like it actually might have made space for you to investigate more.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so.
Yeah, I think so. That's what it sounds like.
But I mean, I think the little bit of uncertainty or the little bit of anxiety, I guess, comes in, is like, because it was about trusting your own experience in the moment, and there was a bit that goes, well, you can't trust that, you know, and
Now
then
that's a good one. There you go. That's
yeah.
it. Yeah. But that's where the healthy investigating of that is, because of course you might not know the answer to that immediately,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. It's like that happens. You know, that when Jesse said doubt, faith,
Yeah.
and trust, I mean, that's like you're describing that process of coming to like wobbling and giving it space and time, and then finding that deeper place of trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it does feel like that, one of those, like you say, those cyclical kind of spiral things, because I feel like, oh, I thought I was okay with all that. I thought I definitely trust my body, even though it has been very difficult in lots of ways and times. I've thought, oh, I got that one, you know.
Right, right. Well,
But
But I
that,
think in some ways,
yeah,
it's actually a very profound question,
yeah.
really, that you ask yourself. That's not just doubt; it's an uncertainty that is very profound. Maybe sometimes these questions are things that you don't need like an immediate answer to. You know, I mean,
Mhm.
and what our path looks like in spiritual development and growth, it's like sometimes we have a baseline and a platform that has helped us so long, and that at some point that starts to shift or fade away or drop, and that kind of, like we were talking before, it's like that can feel uncomfortable, and yet you're actually getting to a deeper truth of something, right? So I'll just say, for example, perhaps there is a sense of like, oh well, this I trust. I trust the body, I trust the mind, or I trust the inner, I can't remember the word, you know, the inner landscape, or you know, the internal, right, to be the truth, or however you would phrase it, or I misphrase it, or you whatever, I can't remember the language. But it's like, well, that is a kind of thing where I could imagine that it is a very powerful, like, guiding principle for a long period of time. And then there are sense of like, well, is that universally true? Sometimes we cannot trust our mind. Sometimes we cannot trust the body, whatever that might mean. To do what? It's like part of the teaching is that the body is undependable, the mind is undependable, right? These things are not stable. They are changing. And that sometimes that sense of like the truth isn't just abstract, that it's concrete, it's in relationship to a concrete experience, not just an abstract truth that we're trying to apply to everything. And that it could be that you are in a place where something is falling away, and that feels like you know, there's a discomfort there, and that potential of that to be true. And that's healthy, you know. Whether it's true or not, it's healthy, like a process, you know.
I'll keep working on it. Thanks.
Mm. Thanks, everyone. Really wonderful to be in conversation today and practice together.
thank you, everybody. It's a
Yeah.
rich practice. Thank you.
Take care.
Hmm.